Hey guys, welcome to the channel. If you're new, please make sure you subscribe, like, comment, and of course share the vids. I've got a really exciting video to show you guys today, and I've got with me Ashton from Cricket For Us 2.0, Venu. So I'm sure you guys would have seen some videos with these guys, and we've got a new member, Arangan, who is going to give us a little bit of a different spin today, I'm sure, as well. So we've got two Pakistanis and two Sri Lankans. So let's see how this goes. We're going to do the post 1995 kind of combined format Sri Lanka 11. So that will include the 96 World Cup win from Sri Lanka as well. And yeah, we're going to see how it goes. And hopefully we can agree on some of them, but we'll see. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to touch upon, because the World Cup is included in this, for Venu, I guess, and Arangan. So maybe you first, Venu. Obviously, we were very young at that time, so we won't remember much of it. But growing up, there must be quite a buzz around that team, and like they must be elevated to some degree when you're growing up. Because I know for me, and I'm sure Usher will agree, the '92 Pakistan World Cup winning side, they're put on like a pedestal. That team doesn't really matter if some of the players are not the greatest, but that team as a whole is like revered. So for you, Venu, can you just quickly touch upon what that team kind of meant to you and what kind of feeling you got from it?
I think that team put Sri Lanka on the map in world cricket in terms of that was their first World Cup win. Before that, they weren't taken as seriously in the world arena. But I thought, and they beat Australia in the final, and rather quite convincingly in the end. Was was an excellent performance by them. Aravinda De Silva hitting 100, supported by Ranatunga as well. So these are class players, one of the legends of Sri Lankan cricket, and obviously Jayasuriya was in that, Murali was in there, Vas was in there. So these are some quality players that have got, for every Sri Lankan, I'm sure they've have a special place in their hearts. So that's all I'm saying.
No, that's fair enough. That makes sense. How about you, Arangan? A similar feeling, or what do you get from thinking about that team and that World Cup winning side?
I think a lot of it is more like how it was as a team. So some of these players, like Venu said, Jayasuriya, Vaz, Murali, they're in sort of the early to late 90s. They were just starting out their career, but they only sort of became legends in the 2000s, if that made sense. Whereas you had players like Aravinda De Silva and Ranatunga, who were better at that point in time. But then with Ranatunga, you hear some of the stuff that sort of Shane Warne comes out with a bit later on, about how they didn't always get on, and he's not necessarily respected in the cricketing world in some respect as how he was, but in what he did to bring the team and the country on the map. I think it was more of a team performance rather than individuals, but there were always one or two that were sort of at a higher level than everyone else.
No, that makes sense. That's interesting about Shane Warne. Actually, I personally haven't had that much about it, so that's quite interesting information. Actually, okay, so maybe, as you said, they're seen more of as a collective rather than one or two superstars, especially at the time. As you're right, I guess Murali came into his own a bit later, as did Jayasuriya even, and Chaminda Vas. They obviously were quite young at the time. Which I guess is a bit similar to Wasim Akram for the Pakistan '92 World Cup, as an example. Okay, cool. So let's go straight into the openers to start off with and see if we can agree. So Ashad, who did you have then first?
I've got Jayasuriya and Tilakaratne Dilshan. Surprisingly, I didn't put Atapatu in there because I just thought because it's all formats, isn't it? It's not just one specific format we're doing.
Yeah.
So, because he didn't play as quick as the other two. Plus, Dilshan at the later stages of his career became a huge deal for me. I thought he revolutionized and played a lot of innovative shots, and it was really good to see that. Jayasuriya would automatically go in my complete Asian 11 all the time, so he's there. So it's both of them, Jayasuriya and Dilshan.
Okay, that's interesting. Before I move on to your guys, just to quickly give some figures on Dilshan first. So 87 tests, average of just under 41. ODIs 330 matches, average of just over 39. So pretty solid. And then in T20s, as we all know, revolutionised T20 cricket for being 360 cricket with his Dill scoop, which I think even to this day is obviously still being utilised. And yeah, 80 matches, average of 28, and I guess it's worth mentioning strike rate of 121, which obviously we have to think about that relatively, because obviously in T20s, that when he started playing T20s, 200 etc. wasn't a normal score to get, or a regular score to get. Nowadays, you will see scores of 180 to 200 quite regularly. So that's really impressive as well. The other one that you had was Jayasuriya, who for me, I just remember growing up and thinking he's just going to whack it everywhere, isn't he? And so for him, Test 110 matches, 40 average, ODIs 445 matches, average of 32. Can't forget he's also he can bowl as well. We'll go on to that in a little bit. So Test 31, average of only 23. T20s 31, average of 23, strike rate of 130. So again, really solid from him. And I mean, in Tests, 110 matches, as I said, 98 wickets, which is not bad, right? That's not bad at all for someone who's not really regarded as an all-rounder. And, average of 34, best of 5 for 34 in innings. ODIs, similar economy of 4.78, 445 matches, 323 wickets. So he's someone who obviously can bowl a little bit with his left arm as well. Arangan, then, do you agree with those openers, or who would you have instead?
So yeah, Jayasuriya just kind of walks into the team basically. To be honest, I was sort of torn between Dilshan and, in a weird way, Upal Tharanga. So even though he didn't make that many runs in the grand scheme of things, but he was fairly decent in the World Cups opening with Dilshan. And my thinking behind it would be more tactical, because sort of there's about 4 batsmen that basically walk straight into the team, and then after that, when you get to the lower order, there isn't really that many batsmen to choose from. So I would either put Tharanga or Dilshan at 2, but maybe Tharanga at 2 to push Dilshan down the order a bit and just have that extra quality lower down.
That's a really interesting choice, actually. That's something that I guess actually we need to take into consideration, because obviously since 95 to the current day, as you said, Sri Lanka they won a World Cup, but also they were in 2 finals as well, and won a T20 World Cup, and they went another final for T20 as well, I'm pretty sure. So they have been in multiple finals since. So I think that is something to take into consideration, their performances in that, rather than just looking at the general stats, because I think you make a good point in that general stats are all well and good, but they don't always tell the whole story. So that's quite an interesting one. Just to touch upon his stats, they're not terrible by any stretch of the imagination. 31 matches, average of 32, ODIs 235, average of 34. So that's pretty good. And then in T20s, 26 matches, average of 16, strike rate of 120. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty solid. Vanu, who did you have? Did you agree with Arangan or Ashad? Do you have something completely different?
I agree with Ashad. The fact that this is an all format 11, I've gone for Jayasuriya and Dilshan. Both batsmen, revolutionised batting in their own right. Jayasuriya, he changed what he was probably the first pinch hitter, and Dilshan kind of later followed, in his shadows, in Jayasuriya's shadows, and really revolutionised T20 batting in particular. And we all know his Dill scoop, ridiculous shot. So, and Dilshan was a decent Test player as well. He hit a really good 190 odd against England at Lords. It's a fantastic innings. I remember watching that, I was thinking ridiculous. So both players, I think, I've gone with Asher, but Arangan has made a really good point about later, which we might come on to later on actually. So we'll leave it till later on.
Yeah, no, I think for now then I think you guys can all agree on Jayasuriya. So I think let's definitely put him in at 1. To touch upon Dilshan, Vanu, in terms, so it was 193. So yeah, that was a really impressive knock. And just looking at his hundreds and 50s, so in tests, 16 hundreds, 23 50s from 87 matches, which is really impressive. So I think we're talking about, even Taranga as well, we're talking about, you know, some really quality players in there. So I think, yeah, if you're looking at it from general, then maybe you look at Dilshan and Jayasuriya. But I think for now, let's stick with Jayasuriya and maybe move to 3, 4, 5, because I feel like there will be some pretty easy shoe-ins into there, and then see what the balance is like. And Jayasuriya does give you a little bit of a spin option, which I think is quite nice to have and handy for sure. Okay, so who have we got at 3? And I think this is going to be a pretty easy one. But Venny, let's go to you then first, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be your hero. So who's at 3?
3 is Sangakkara. Has to be. Come on, Sangakkara. That's it. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Ashja, do you agree? And even if you do agree, do you think there's anyone else that could go in there? Because potentially,
I don't know.
Devil's advocate.
Devil's advocate. You can't really disagree with Sangakkara in any way, shape, or form for number 3. To be honest, this is the thing. I can't remember exactly. So Venu might be able to correct me. But where did De Silva bat? Arvinder De Silva. Did he bat 3 or did he bat 4? In most formats, because if he batted 3, I'd say maybe him. But I've got him lower down in my order anyway.
De Silva
batted 4.
Yeah,
right?
4. So in the World Cup final, he batted at number 4. But let's see test matches. I think he does bat a number. Let me check. Yeah, or number 4 or 5. Depends. Yeah.
Okay, then no one else at 3. The only reason why I think I could potentially argue Sangakkara at 3 is maybe Kalawatarna, because he's a keeper. And Sangakkara is a keeper as well. But I thought, Kalawatarna, I don't know if he's played that many matches, if he has that great stats. But that's the only confusion I had. If I wanted to put him into the team, he would be a genuine wicketkeeper who could bat decently well, rather than an amazing batsman who also kept wickets. So the only other devil's advocate I could potentially play is Kalawatarna.
So not Chandamar then?
No. No.
As a wicketkeeper, no?
Wait.
Yeah, so Arangan, what about you then? So just to touch upon, I'm assuming Sankara is a shoe-in for you at 3.
100%.
But Venu's, I think me and Venu have done a little video on this already, and Venu's talked about how much Sankara meant to him growing up. I just wanted to get a gauge of whether he meant as much, or even if he didn't, what kind of impression does he give you as a Sri Lankan yourself, growing up, and also now as well? Like, how do you perceive him?
It's really interesting. So growing up, he's definitely an icon. Obviously in the way that he plays cricket, but also the way he conducts himself off cricket, a humanitarian, sort of gets involved with politics. So yeah, definitely he meant a lot growing up to me. I did actually meet him once in Sri Lanka. And they sort of say never meet your heroes, but that's a topic for another conversation. But yeah, so I guess him in person was slightly different, but I still love him as a pundit and everything he talks about in cricket. And
oh, really? No, you got to touch upon it now. You can't say that and not touch upon it. Go on, give us a quick 2-minute.
So I was in a restaurant in Sri Lanka once, and when I was on holiday, and he sort of walked in with his family, and obviously being a Sri Lankan cricket fan, I saw him and I was like, oh hi, I'm a massive fan, and he looked a bit embarrassed and sort of shook my hand. And then he got like super drunk later on that afternoon and started ranting about politics, which just wasn't really the image of him I had in my head, if that makes sense. But yeah.
You're breaking Venu's heart, I think. To be fair.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? He likes to drink. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
He doesn't play cricket anymore.
The fact that Arangan mentioned it and was like, maybe don't meet your heroes, I think. But no, I think at the end of the day, look, I mean, it could have been a lot worse. He could have done something, a lot worse. And the fact that at least he was nice to you when you met him is probably the main takeaway from that, rather than his ranting about politics. But yeah, I mean, to be fair as well, like me and Venny mentioned, he is now chairman of the MCC. And I mean, as a Pakistani, so I think Ashok can agree that he took the MCC to Pakistan to make sure that, everyone said, look, it's okay. You can come here and play. And obviously he was part of that side where the whole issue happened in the first place in Lahore. As Venu has said, he's touched Gaddafi Stadium. And yeah, that's where it happened. And he obviously was happy to go back and play a little bit of cricket there and enjoy it. So I think props to him to what he's done in cricket. And maybe Arangan just caught him on a little bit of a interesting night, let's say. So fair enough. But yeah, to go on to his stats, I mean, incredible. So 134 matches, 57 average, 38 hundreds, 52 50s. In ODIs, 404 matches, average of 42, 25 hundreds, 93 50s. And even in T20s, I mean, he averages 31. That's from 56 matches, a strike rate of just under 120 as well with 850s. So I know he was one of the first players as well to play all the franchise cricket. And I think in the T20 World Cups, he was integral. He was integral to the T20 World Cup win for Sri Lanka. Obviously, he was too early for the 96 win. But I think if he was around at that time, he would have walked into that side. I think we can probably safely say. And probably regarded, me and Benny talked about him being one of the best number threes in Test cricket ever, if not the best, which I think me and Benny kind of think. But yeah, Usher's face doesn't. So maybe I'll ask Usher about it. But yeah, I mean, he has to be in there. And I think me and Benny have seen him live, and he's just incredible. Time with the ball, can do everything, can just a multi-dimensional batsman. So that's my analysis of that. I should say you kind of were a bit like, oh yeah, but best Test batsman at number 3. So who would you have at number 3 instead of him? Just before we move on to our number 4s.
Just in general, or just in general, like World 11? That's what you mean?
Yeah, so but for Test cricket, we said.
Oh yeah,
so maybe not.
I have Ponting at 3 rather than Sangakkara.
Okay, well that's fair enough. I can see why. When me and Benny went through the stats, I think Kumar Sangakkara was the top. I think below him was Hashim Amla and Ponting when you look at like cumulative data. But I can see why someone would have Ponting in there. I mean, if
Ponting because of his captaincy as well. So that's the reason why I automatically put him in. But that's a discussion for another time. I haven't even thought about World 11 for that.
No, we'll talk about that another day. But I was just interested to see your reaction when I said it. That's why. Okay, so that's an easy one. Number 3, Sangakkara. At 4, who do we have? Arangan. Who did you go with?
Just because they could bat together, I went for Jayawardene. Sangakkara, Jayawardene at the crease. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Ashud, what do you think?
Agree with that. It's hard to argue with, like, there's 5 or 6 Sri Lankan players who you can't argue with in a Sri Lankan 11, and these two are these two are 2 important pieces. If they bat together, they're just absolutely prolific. So yeah, I'd have him at 4, Jayawardene. Yeah, can't argue with that.
Venu, do you agree?
100%. Jayawardene at 4.
Oh, easy one. So, okay, so quickly to go through his stats and tests, 149 matches, an average of just under 50, 3400s, 50-50s on incredible test stats. ODIs, 448 matches, flipping heck, 33 average, 1900s and 77 50s. And then he did play some T20s as well, 55, average just under 32, but really impressive strike rate of 133, because at that time that would have been very quick. And 100 and 950, so really good. The only thing that I want to say to kind of really throw a spanner in the works, because I know that Aravinda de Silva played at 4 predominantly. Obviously, he had his stats are not quite as good. 93 matches and tests and 42 average in ODIs, 308 matches and 35 average. So slightly better ODI average than Mahela Jayawardene, but I think it's hard to disagree that when you got Jayawardene and Sangakkara batting together, they were one of the best like partnerships in cricket probably ever. So I think it's hard to disagree with that. And Venu, when you saw, quick question for you before we move on to 5, when you saw them batting together, were you in a state of, you know what, everything's going to be fine? 9 times out of 10, were you thinking, you know what, they're going to get us over the line or they're going to get us the runs? Were they the pillar of that Sri Lanka for so many years, right? I mean, that's how I saw it, but is that how you guys saw it as well?
Yes, I do agree with what you said about they were the pillar of Sri Lanka's batting. If one didn't make a score, the other one will. So it's just, they're bound, one or two of them are bound to make runs in whatever format they're playing in. And, they had a great partnership. They understood each other's game so well. And they've got that record partnership in Test cricket, over 600 runs against South Africa, I think, in Test matches. The only thing that, that's missing from their career is that World Cup win. That's the only thing that's missing from Sangakkara and Jayawardene's, trophy cabinet, that 50 over World Cup. But in terms of what they brought to Sri Lanka cricket, they're the pillars of Sri Lanka cricket of the last 15 or so years. And it's a shame they're no longer playing, but that's that.
You can tell that Veni's very somber about Sangakkara and Jayawardene not playing. It's okay, but I'm sure Sri Lankan cricket will get back to a very solid place soon.
We'll see.
I'm sure.
We'll see.
I mean, they did beat England in the World Cup, who are the champions. So technically, Sri Lanka are the World Cup champions at the moment.
So did Pakistan.
Yeah, exactly. They should just do a match between Pakistan and Sri Lanka and decide. That's it. And hopefully it doesn't get rained off like last time. Okay, so number five is going to be, I'm hoping, a little bit more difficult because I think 3 and 4 is very easy. So Arangan, who do you have at number 5?
So this is where it kind of started to get difficult for me, because when you look at a lot of other countries, they have batsmen that you can kind of just shoe in at number 5 and have like ridiculous stats. Or there's a few players I was thinking of that I'd seen during the World Cup periods, but none of them really had great averages. So I initially had Dilshan down at 5, but equally I could have had someone like Angelo Matthews or maybe even like Dilan Samarawira, who was an okay-ish batsman, but when I was looking at his numbers, he actually did like fairly decently in terms of his average and the number of runs that he scored. But I guess the problem with Sri Lanka when it comes down to like these World Cups was as soon as he got past Sangakkara, Jayasuriya, Dilshan and Mahela Jayawardene, there just wasn't that lower order kind of quality there, which is probably why they lost compared to countries like Australia.
No, that's a fair point. I think 5 can be contested. I have someone that I'll definitely put in, but yeah, we'll see what everyone else thinks. Ashad, who do you have in there?
So I'd go with De Silva at 5 and then Ranatunga at 6. Mainly, right? The thing is, because I started watching cricket in 1996, right? I watched that World Cup and I saw that Sri Lanka team. So for me, the main captain for Sri Lanka in my head is Ranatunga, and one of their best batsmen is De Silva. So like that's automatically they're shooing for my team every time. Again, the positions in terms of, because we've got Sangakkara and Jayawardene 3-4, it's hard to put them into any place. But obviously I'll just push them in, and then I'm just going ahead because I know a lot of, Venu and Arangan probably disagree with me, but I'd get Angelo Matthews at 7 because I think these two need to be in the team. I can't, what is it? De Silva's average over 300 matches is like 35, a strike rate of over 80. For a person who played in the 90s and then early 2000s, that's really good. Ranatunga, I mostly put him in for his captaincy, but also his batting. He was like, it's not an exact comparison, but I see Ranatunga as I see Clive Lloyd for West Indies. So like captaincy and batting and like that solid base. So that's just my 2 cents on it, but I'd like to hear what Venu has to say.
And Ranatunga, to be fair, had a strike rate of 78, so not too dissimilar to Aravinda De Silva as well. I mean, both, so in ODIs, Ranatunga had an average of 36, Aravinda De Silva 35, so Ranatunga was slightly higher in ODIs, but in test matches, Aravinda De Silva 43 average, Ranatunga 36, so obviously, yeah, very solid. And as you said, they were part of the World Cup winning side, so that does count for something. Aravinda De Silva especially was very prolific in that World Cup. Having Angelo Matthews at 7 is pretty controversial, so I think we'll go on to that maybe a little bit. But Venu, so who did you have at 5 first?
I agree with Ashton, to be honest, with 5 and 6. Aravinda De Silva at 5, and Arjuna Ranatunga VI, who's the captain as well. And I really like what Ashad said. I think Ranatunga was kind of the Clive Lloyd for Sri Lanka. You don't have the West Indies team that was so prolific back in the 80s was thanks to Clive Lloyd. So same thing can be said about Ranatunga. I know he was, he backed his team, to the death, and when he stood up for Murali, I think was it during the World Cup when Murali was told for chucking the ball, and he stood up for Murali, and they walked off the pitch, and he was a great leader, great captain. And Aravinda Silva, he hit that 100 in the World Cup final, and he is very good Test batsman, probably one of Sri Lanka's all-time greats in terms of Test batting. 5 and 6, definitely those two.
Really? So Angelo Matthews, right? I mean, surely we can't put him in at 7. Because I feel like that's because if you look at him, he's never batted lower than. I know he used to bat, say, 6 quite a few years ago, but now I think 4 or 5 really is his position, especially in Test matches. And if you look at his figures, to be fair, I mean, Venny, we've discussed this, but I think average of 45 in Test matches, which, I mean, okay, he is better than Aravinda Silva's. Maybe that will look better over time, because I think when you compare them and think about them at the moment, you don't think of him as being maybe necessarily as good as Aravinda Silva. But in ODI's average of 42, strike rate of over 80. I mean, T20s as well, average of 27, strike rate of 119. So, I mean, he's a class act, and he gives you something with the ball. But I don't think, I don't know, personally, I mean, would he do a good job at 7? Because at 7, you need, even in Test cricket nowadays, you need someone who's going to knock it around, quick singles. He's not really that type of player. What do you think then, Manu?
The thing is, at 7, I'll put Matthews. I think I'll probably go with Matthews, as Ashad just said. The fact that he gives you a decent bowl option. I also, I think player that could go in there would come to someone like Russell Arnold or Hashan Tilakaratne as well. Hashan Tilakaratne has got a very good Test stats as well. He's got. Hashan
So would you put in? So you would be happy to put in Ranatunga and Aravinda De Silva instead of Matthews, even though Matthews has got clearly the better stats? That's my question. That's what I'm thinking. Because I feel like there is an emotional decision when it comes to Ranatunga and Aravinda De Silva because of what they did in the World Cup, which I do get. And I think that does need to play a part as well. I'm just thinking about whether that should play so much of a part that someone like Angelo Matthews doesn't get into it because his figures are so good.
Can I just say something? You also have to realize that between 1996 and 2003, let's say, when De Silva and Ranatunga were playing, they were playing against players that are much better than the players Angelo Matthews was playing against in terms of bowling and stuff. I don't know when Matthews debuted, but I think it was after 2004, 2005, right? So he wasn't playing against McGrath, Shane Warne, Wasim Akram, Waqar Younis, Shoaib Akhtar, for the sake of argument, Brett Lee, I keep forgetting, Pollock, Antini. So I'm just trying to get other names, but Anil Kumble not as much. Zahir Khan, well, he played against Zahir Khan because he played IPL as well.
Yeah, so 2008 was his first match.
Yeah, so a lot of the big guns, from my understanding, which were huge in the 90s and early 2000s, Angelo Matthews didn't play against those. And De Silva and Ranatunga played against those with a strike rate that was really good for that time, with an average that was really good at that time. So that's my defense for that.
Yeah, maybe I think also, I guess, it is relative to a degree in terms of, at the moment, bigger scores are more common, especially in ODIs. You're seeing scores of 300 plus, and that's what people are aiming for. Back in the day, a score of 200 plus was what they were looking at. Like, realistically, that's what they were looking at. And it was more of a, I don't know whether it's a more balanced game, but it's definitely more in favour of bowlers than it is now. I think it's more of a batsman-friendly game now, for sure.
Yeah, Sri Lanka is, I think they had the highest score in ODIs for like 10 years or something, like 390 something, can't remember the exact figure, but like they had Jayasuriya at the top, who revolutionized the pinch hitting at the top of the order. Then whoever you had, I can't remember exactly, but you had De Silva, Ranatunga also propelling that run rate to get them to over 300. So I don't know, I think it was against Kenya or someone like that that they got that really high 300 score, but they had that for ages. So I would find it very difficult to slot in Angelo Matthews anywhere above 7, because I think he should be in the team, but I don't see him batting anywhere in the top 6.
Okay, interesting. Do you agree, Angan? Yeah, you're going to say something in your goal.
Yeah, I agree with that, Strat. I'd say that Matthews probably deserves to squeeze in the team at 7 because of Ranatunga and De Silva. Like in his defence, like Matthews, he was Sri Lanka captain, but it was sort of the post Jayawardene, post Sangakkara, when the team was just a little bit flat. And whereas the other two sort of propelled the country and propelled Sri Lankan cricketing, Matthews was a good individual, but in terms of everything else that he offered, you know, you could argue maybe less so. So I would say Matthews, but making space for De Silva and Ranatunga.
I think the other thing, I agree. I think the other thing to bear in mind is that maybe Angelo Matthews wasn't, at the start of his career, he was part of a good Sri Lanka side. But in the last however many years, he has pretty much had to do, especially in Test cricket or on his own in Tests. There haven't been many batsmen who have scored runs. And I think, yes, you can say, well, okay, well, then he scores a bigger portion of the runs. But I think you have to take it as more he's played in a struggling to a degree batting lineup where he has performed really well. So I personally would definitely have him in there. I mean, I'm happy to slot him in at 7. I think what your guys' points are about Ranatunga and Aravinda De Silva. I think Aravinda De Silva, as someone who I haven't seen loads and loads of him, but I have seen matches of him, and I know what kind of player he is, and I think he definitely has to be in there. Ranatunga for his captaincy, I can get on board with as well. So that's our 5 and 6 sorted. So at 4 we had Jayawardene, 5 we've gone with Aravinda De Silva, 6 Ranatunga. Then at 7 as our at least one of our all-rounders, then we've gone with Angelo Matthews, who is, not too shabby, to say the least. And looking at his bowling as well, I mean, to be fair, economy of 2.7 in tests, his average is not great in tests, it's 52, but in ODIs it's 33, which is then more solid. I know he hasn't bowled that much recently, but he's starting to come into his own more as an all-rounder again after getting fit. So, yeah, I'm happy to slot him in there. Who do you guys have at 8 then? Ashid, do you want to go?
Pass. Chimindwa. I don't think anyone should argue that, but you can do if you want. But I think, again, his stats, I'm just going to check now very quickly if I find him. But basically, he's one of the highest wicket takers for Sri Lanka.
Yeah, so I've got them here if you want. So he's got 355 wickets in tests, 400 in ODIs, ridiculous. Average of 27 in ODIs, average of 29 in tests. Phenomenal. And I just remember watching him and thinking, flipping heck, this guy is just something else. I mean, he's, left. I think being a left-hander definitely did help him as well, but just the ability to swing the ball with such control, I think was incredible. And he managed to get some movement off the pitch as well. And I just think he was great. I think I personally wouldn't disagree with Chimindwa Vaas. I think the only thing is whether you have him at 8 or 9, but I think he could bat a bit. So I don't mind 8. Venny, do you agree with that? Chimindwa Vaas at 8?
100%, yeah.
Okay, no, very short and sweet. I like that. Arangan, how about you?
Yeah, definitely. I found it quite funny that Chimindwa Vaas has got 3,000 test runs. I don't know how I missed that, but yeah, definitely 8.
Yeah, Chimindwa Vaas, 3,000. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, so his average 24 in tests, not bad, man. That's not bad at all for a number 8. I think, Sri Lanka, as Venny would
100
probably...
as well. He's got 100 as
100, 13 50s. Yeah, so high score of 100 not out. You'll love that. That would have helped his average, that's for sure.
He's probably arguably Sri Lanka's best pace bowler of all time.
Yeah, I think we will come on to someone who might disagree with that later down the bowling lineup. But 100%. I think Chimindwa Vaas is... he reminds me of like a Sri Lankan Wasim Akram. That's...
I was going to say exactly like when in the late 90s, I was like, all I want to see is Wasim Akram and Chimindwa Vaas playing in the same team, bowling from either end. And it was like, if that happens, because Sri Lanka had Zoysa, didn't they, for a little while, which was a left arm bowler as well. So I was like, nah, you need Wasim Akram, man. You need both of them to ball together. And there were like Asian 11 teams playing against each other, against the rest of the world and stuff like that. So that was one of the highlights when I saw both of them play. I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah, so Chaminda Vaas, that's a pretty easy choice, I think, as well. So at 9, so Venu, who did you go with at 9?
Probably the player that we were just mentioning who could arguably also be Sri Lanka's best ever pace bowler is Malinga at number 9. You know, he revolutionised ODI bowling, especially at the death with his Yorkers, T20 bowling as well. You know, at one point, all the franchises, you know, he was probably the first player everyone wanted to get, Malinga, because he was so hard to, you know, bat against. And, you know, his slingy action, you know, Sri Lanka take pride in having bowlers that have slightly different actions, and they do change. He changed ODI cricket, that's for sure, and T20 cricket. So Malinga at number 9.
Yeah, I think Malinga was just incredible. I'd so quickly just touch upon his stats, because as Venu said, he revolutionised, I think, cricket as a whole in terms of white ball cricket especially. But to be fair, even in tests, he had an average of 33, which is, you know, still very good. Wickets just over 100 in test matches as well from 30 matches. I think when you look at his ODI and T20 stats, I think, yeah, they might be a little bit expensive. But when you look at his average, you just see how good he was. So 226 ODIs, average of just under 29, economy of 5.35. And then in T20s, average economy of 7.42, but an average of just under 21. And then 107 wickets from there from 84 matches. So, yeah, I think incredible player. And as Venu said, it's probably one of the only players that can say, you know, maybe I'm the best fast bowler that Sri Lanka's ever had, rather than Chaminda Vaas. Questionable whether we should have him at number 9, because he only averages 11 in tests, 6 in ODIs and 6 in T20s, but I think he's probably in there. What do you think? First of all, do you agree with him being in there? And
yeah, I agree with him being in the team. This is the thing. I had everyone listed apart from number 9. So for me, Malinga would go 10. But for number 9, I was between a lot of players. So again, the Sri Lankan cohort here can probably guide me in the right direction. But I had like 3 players which I was thinking about. So I was thinking Nuwan Kulasekara, Ajantha Mendes, and maybe Tisara Pereira. I think Tisara Pereira, that's too low down for him anyway, but just as a thought, just thinking out loud. But I think Ajantha Mendes or Kulasekara I would put in at number 9. I'd put Malinga at number 10, but go on, Venu, I think you want to say something.
How about the one of the, you know, the second Haraf, exactly.
You know what?
I was going to say that.
You know what? I genuinely thought about that initially, right? But I completely forgot about him just before I came on the call. So yes, Herath gets that. Sorry, yeah, forget what I was saying.
I think, well, no, you know what? It also depends, though, what you want, because if we're looking at all formats as well, if you have Angelo Matthews in there, yes, he is a seam option. Then we've got Malinga and Chaminda Vaas, that's only 3. But really, with Angelo Matthews, he might not bowl. It depends on how fit he is. But say he's super fit, that's only 3 seam bowlers. Anyway, so it's whether you want 3 seam bowlers and potentially 2 spinners and then a part-time spinner in Jayasuriya, whether you want 4 seam bowlers and then I'm assuming we're going to pick Murali, so that will be a spinner, and then you have Jayasuriya as a part-time spinner. So I think that's where we need to look at the balance. So I think Malinga at 10 is a shoe-in. I think we can probably agree on that. Aaron, who did you go with at 9?
I went with Malinga, but happy to have him at 10, to be honest.
Who did you go with at 10 then? I guess probably the better answer.
It was difficult. It's that whole thing about squad depth again. So I was thinking of Herath, but then you've basically only got 2 full-time seamers. But then again, you would probably bat Murali and Herath, and you bat those 4 bowlers to bowl out any team in the world anyway. But then, like Asjad said, like I was thinking maybe Kulasekara next, but then the gap between Malinga and Vaas and Kulasekara is just massive in terms of sort of statistics, but the way they played. So I went with Herath.
Yeah, Kulasekara, I'm just looking at stats here. I mean, Asha said he might be too low, but to be fair, looking at his batting, he's probably 9 is probably about right for him. To be honest with you, average of 14 in tests, 15 in ODIs, 10 in T20s. I think 9 would probably be fine. But bowling wise, yeah, I mean, Herath, I think, is just, yeah, quality. And to be fair, in tests, he's got a better, I think he's got a better average. Yeah, he's got a slightly similar, he's got similar average batting wise in tests, Herath. And then when you get to his figures, 28 average, ridiculous. How many wickets? 433. Wow.
Yeah, forget what I said for 9. Yeah, Herat, I think, gets straight in. I genuinely forgot about him just before I came on the call.
I mean, even in
apologies.
Thing is that, you forget though that he's not just a quality test bowler, because I mean, in ODIs, 31 average, 74 wickets. To be fair, he only played 17 T20s. I'm not really sure why, because his average is 20, economy of 6. So I don't know whether when he got older, he concentrated just on test cricket. Maybe Venu, is that correct? You're nodding your head.
Potentially, I think he might have had some injury concerns with his shoulder, I think. But yeah, imagine that team, Harath at one end and Murali the other end. I'm like, what? No batsmen they haven't got a chance, to be honest. And yeah, quality, both of them quality. Obviously, I do get your point about having another pace bowler, but Herath has to play. So Herath at number 10.
Okay, no, that's fine. That makes sense then. Yeah, go on, Ashad.
Just a point. So if you're thinking, if we have Vas and Malinga as the fast bowlers, Matthews bowls a few, you've still got Jayasuriya who can bowl a couple as well. So, and if we have, we haven't decided number 2 yet, but if we have Dilshan can bowl. He's not just a batsman. So you can kind of split 10. If you're playing an ODI match, you can play 10 overs. You can split in between those 3 and you'll get that kind of thing. And then you have those 4 amazing bowlers to bowl their other 4.
Yeah, I think I guess my query was not whether we had enough bowling, it was whether we had enough pace bowlers. But I guess because obviously you're just very spinner heavy, but I think that's just the nature of how Sri Lankan cricket has been, and the fact that they're that good that you have to include them. So I'm happy with that. And I think, as you said, Malinga and Chaminda Vas to open up when Matthews first change, and then to be honest, you probably got a team 2-3 down anyway, so it's not really an issue, at least. So that's fine. Okay, so I'm assuming we're going to go with Murali at 11. So first of all, I'm going to go to Arangan. I mean, Murali, arguably the best spinner of all time. He's definitely the best spinner of all time in terms of stats. I mean, 800 wickets, average of 22, economy of 2.4. This is in tests. In ODIs, 534 wickets, average of 23, ridiculous. T20s, average of 22, economy of 6. I mean, these are just, any bowler would probably die to have these stats, metaphorically. So I think this is just, I mean, he's a supernova, right? But in terms of what he meant to you growing up, maybe as a Sri Lankan cricket fan and being Sri Lankan yourself, I mean, watching him and what did he symbolize for you?
Yeah, Murali on, I guess, just almost pretty much every level, is sort of growing up initially is kind of like an idol to many Sri Lankan fans. It's not just sort of his stats and how he is as a bowler, which is incredible. Like, he's statistically the greatest bowler of all time, but also just the things about his action, how a lot of controversy about his bowling action coming from sort of Sri Lanka, whereas a country that he's a guy who's been sort of put down a lot of, and then that kind of represents Sri Lanka on the international stage in general. But then also with the politics of it, with him being kind of the only Tamil guy in the team for most of it, for at least 2 decades or so. So for a lot of people, he was someone that we all looked up to for that reason. So he was not only flying the flag for Sri Lanka, but also flying the flag for Tamil people. But then, of course, later on, there's a lot of controversy about why he should or shouldn't be celebrated in Sri Lanka, which I think is sort of independent of cricket, to be honest. But as a cricketer, he was an icon for Sri Lanka for at least 20 years, even right up until the end of his career. He's a quality bowler.
Yeah, no, agreed. I mean, just watching him, I remember Especially, I remember playing with him on like Cricket 2006, and he was just impossible to play against. And I just love bowling with him. And it's such a silly thing to think about, but it's funny because the way that I just remember that game. The reason why is because I remember bowling with him and thinking, and then watching him, in the flesh, and they're just thinking, you know what, this is actually how good he is. Like the fact that he was so unplayable, but that he bowled like it was a computer game. Like that's how easy it was for him, almost to a degree. And I think revolutionised spin bowling. And I think I should mention Ajantha Mendes, and I think he probably took some inspiration from Murali in the way that he ended up bowling. Yeah, I mean, just Murali, just incredible bowler, I think, and for me, definitely the best spin bowler of all time. Yeah, he's, as you said, Arangan, probably potentially the best bowler of all time as well. Very quickly, do you want to touch upon what he meant for you growing up and what kind of impact he had on you as a Sri Lankan cricket fan?
I agree with what Arangan said. I think he's basically said what I would say, to be honest. But in terms of what he meant to me, I think just seeing a Sri Lankan Tamil just be on top of the game, the best in the world. I think Arangan can say this as well. I think growing up, I think it told us we could be like that. We could be the best in the world. Whether it's cricket, whether it's anything in life. If you've got talent, if you worked hard at it, you can be the best. So I think that was really important. And yeah, he was just a role model and arguably the greatest bowler of all time.
Yeah, it's tough to disagree, to be fair. And I think he epitomised really spin bowling, but also Sri Lanka at the time in terms of being a very, very difficult side to play against whilst he was playing for them, and obviously backed up from some of the batsmen that we mentioned. So I think we've got our team sorted, apart from number 2, which we're going to talk about. So at 8, 9, 10, 11. So 8, we had Chaminda Vas. At 9, we've gone with Herath or Malinga. So I think let's go with Herath because I think he is slightly better with the bat. Malinga 10 and Murali at 11. So I mean that's just quality for your 8 to 11. And then obviously we've decided the rest earlier. But at 2 then, so I think from what I can hear, we're leaning towards Dilshan, but Arangan, because I know you were talking about Taranga, so I want you to make a case for Taranga, and then we'll see. Let's see how it sits.
Well, I mean, I've sort of been convinced by the rest of our discussion, to be honest. I think for me, Ranatunga and De Silva players, I like you said, I didn't see too much of. Probably I was too young to watch them in '95. So Taranga is probably a player I saw more of, and I have memories of him even in the Cricket World Cup. I think there's a game where him and Dilshan just completely destroyed England, like a 10-wicket defeat. So him for that. But then having said that, I think just in terms of what they contributed to cricket, I would have to put Dilshan there too.
Well done, Ashton and Benny. You've avoided any type of conflict and have convinced Arangan before it's even started.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go
on. What Arangan pointed then about, what was it, that partnership was Dilshan and Taranga against England. I think it's the World Cup. I still remember that today. Just demolition, wasn't it? I remember going to school. I think the day after, just making fun of all the England fans. It's like, what happened? It was fantastic. It was, I think it's a 2011 World Cup must have been.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, and
in India, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and this just destroyed England, and they both got hundreds each, won by 10 wickets. That was one of the highlights. So thanks for bringing that up, Arangan. Made me smile.
Oh God, yeah. Well, that's our 11 sorts. So we've gone with Jayasuriya, Dilshan. So 1 and 2. At 3, the venue's all-time greatest player, Sangakkara, in his opinion. Number 4, Jayawardene. Number 5, we went with Aravinda De Silva. 6, Ranatunga. 7, Angelo Matthews. 8, Herath. 8, Chaminda Vas. 9, Herath. 10, Malinga. And 11, Murali. Yep.
Who would be our captain and wicketkeeper? I guess it's a given.
I think our captain, I'm assuming, is going to be Ranatunga. That's part of the reason why we picked him. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, it has to be. Who'd be a vice? Would it be Jayawardene or Sangha? That's
I'd say
difficult.
Jayawardene.
Yeah, it has to be Jayawardene. Yeah, probably. My only issue with Sangakkara is the only wicketkeeper there. Am I correct? The only issue with that is, ODI T20. He kept behind the stumps and he was still fantastic. But the stat we alluded to in our video about Sangakkara a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
When the gloves were off him in Test matches, his average was like 60 odd.
It was 66. Yeah.
So,
and then without it was, but to be fair, without it was still 47. I mean, you're going to get into the team no matter what, so it doesn't really matter that much.
That's true.
I think it was a marked difference without the gloves, but I think the fact that even with the gloves, his average of 47, I just think it's one of those things. And would you displace one of the other players for a wicketkeeper? Probably not. I think that's what we've got to look at maybe.
I was just going to say, if Sangha's got a 47 average, right? You've got De Silva and Ranatunga in that team as well, so they can make up those 19 runs if needed.
The thing is, I think Arangan made this point earlier. I think the reason why Sri Lanka didn't win 2007-2011 World Cup was the fact that they didn't have much batting after Jayawardene at 5 and 6 and 7, and the fact that if Sangha and Jayawardene had De Silva and Ranatunga to follow after them after their hard work, that would have been amazing. They would have won the World Cup, that's for sure. But it's a shame. But oh well.
I think in 2011, I remember watching, and it was I think that game Jayawardene actually did make a century.
He did, yes.
And Gautam Gambhir made 90, and then Dhoni came in at number 7 for India and just basically won the game with 90. And it was one of our best players got a century, but it still wasn't enough. And maybe that's just what Sri Lanka were missing.
Yeah, there's too much reliance, I think, on Sangakkara and Jayawardene. Well, it's really the top 4, I guess, because the top 4 was good with Jayasuriya and Dilshan. But I think you had to have those guys perform for Sri Lanka to perform well. And obviously, the fact that one of them did perform, which is probably what they were looking for, but sometimes you need runs down the order, not necessarily tail end, but as Arangan said, at 7, 6, 7, 8, that's just the way of the modern game now since 1995. That's just the way it has been.
I think that that example really played a part in the 2015 World Cup. Sangakkara hit 4 centuries in a row, and then got to the quarterfinals against South Africa, and Jayawardene and Sangakkara got out cheaply, and Sri Lanka didn't. I think they just managed to get over 100, and South Africa easily won that game. So it does show that they were lacking in that depth in batting, and so just thought I'd mention that in 2015.
What would be interesting, and maybe I'll have a try and see if I can dig up some stats research, is how many games Sri Lanka lost when Jayawardene or Sangakkara didn't make a score. If they didn't make, say, more than 50, one of them didn't make more than 50 plus, say, or 40 plus, and see what the percentage win-loss ratio was for Sri Lanka, because I'm assuming that it was the percentage of games they lost when one of them didn't make a score was very big, I would assume, just because even with the openers that they had with Jayasuriya and Dilshan or whoever else it might be in the time, I think there was still a very big reliance on them. So that would be quite interesting. I might try and look that up actually, see what I can find.
That's a really good point about what Arangan said, that India had the capability to have someone like Dhoni at 7 who could move up in the order and come in and kind of play that. Whatever he got, he just came in and smashed it. They didn't need Yuvraj Singh or someone to bat above him. So I completely agree with that. I think if Sangakkara and Jayawardene do have players like De Silva and Ranatunga, it's hard to stop them. And then you've got Matthews at 7. That's what I'm saying. And if you've got Matthews at 7, that means your team is stacked, isn't it?
Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah, I mean, that's our team then. So just to quickly confirm again, so 1, we had Jayasuriya, 2, Dilshan, 3, Sangakkara, 4, Jayawardene, 5, we went with Aravinda De Silva, 6, Ranatunga, 7, Angelo Matthews, 8, Chaminda Vaas, 9, Hera, 10 Malinga, and 11 Murali. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was just Ashton was just doing his. Yeah, go on, Benny.
Yeah, what I was saying, it'd be really nice to do a Pakistan one of this, and see who would win. Do like a matchup between the Sri Lanka and Pakistan, because that would be good actually. I wish, seeing the likes of Wasim Akram bowling against Sangakkara and Jayawardene, that would be interesting.
Okay, no, that's fine. I thank you very much, guys, for your time on this. It's been, to be fair, it's not been too bad. I think it was pretty smooth picking. We will most likely, I think, we're discussing doing a Pakistan combined one. That will probably be a bit more fiery, I'm assuming, because there's I just think there's a lot of people that might be considered, but we'll see. And then we're thinking about doing maybe a combined one as well of the two teams and looking at that. So stay tuned for that. Before we wrap up, then, do you guys have anything you want to say before?
Looking at this team, I just get very upset, because just thinking about, this is how good Sri Lanka used to be, and you just got Matthews is the only hard player who's currently playing right now, and he's probably past his prime. But yeah, it is what it is. I think the golden era of Sri Lankan cricket has long gone, hasn't it, Arangan?
Yeah, I think cricket in general, I mean, I'm just quite nostalgic about sort of like 2003, 2004, 2005, when you genuinely had like some of the best players ever playing against each other. It definitely does make me a bit sad. But also, please don't kill me, Sangakkara.
But it's a shame, because you would think, having such quality players for young people in Sri Lanka growing up, surely there would be an influx of players coming through. Surely they would have some sort of legacy. But it just hasn't come through, has it? That's what. Yeah, maybe another time, another video.
It's difficult. I just think there are at times certain teams, there's peaks and troughs, right, to certain teams. So for England at the moment, they're in the golden generation, but before that they were struggling massively, especially in white ball cricket. So I think it really does depend just on the talent at the time. It also is to do with careful selection, how you handle the players.
Politics.
Like Pakistan are notoriously known for not handling players well at times, but then at sometimes we have handled them okay. When we have, it's been good for us. So it's a mixture of things, I think. But yeah, thank you for that, Vanu. That's a good point. Anyone else? No?
It's a good video. I enjoyed it.
You're good?
Just on that point, it's like the West Indian era was the 70s and 80s. Sri Lankan era was the 90s and 2000s. Like their best team could possibly get. Correctly said exactly what Venu said. Like it's hard to get anyone from the past 10 years into a West Indian all-time 11. At least we got Angela Matthews and Lasan Malinga in Sri Lanka, right?
It's true.
Maybe we should do this for all the major teams, actually. I'm kind of tempted to do it, because West Indies makes me quite interested, because there are some good players around. I just don't know whether they're as good as you said.
And South Africa as well.
Historic ones. Yeah, and also, to be fair though, Ashton, if you do post 95 for West Indies, you will get some in, because
you'll have
to be able to include.
Yeah, that's true. Post 95.
So, okay. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Maybe we'll do that, actually. Okay, thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. As I said, if you haven't, please make sure you subscribe, like, comment, share the vids, as always. And during lockdown, now we are in lockdown. Well, we're in lockdown in London. So, as I've said on some of my previous videos, you literally have nothing better to do than watch my ugly mug on YouTube now, because you've got so much more free time, because you're in lockdown. You've got nothing else to do. So, of course, please watch and enjoy. And you can watch everyone else's lovely faces as well in this video. So I hope you enjoyed looking at our faces, because I certainly did. So thank you very much, and stay safe. Thank you.
Bye.